Hello, I'm Tammy Royle, and I would like to welcome you to the Royle Archives.
Well, I am, the third generation of my family. So I started coming, my first summer at the CSA was 1939. And my mother and grandmother were here before me. So we've always been part of the CSA.
It goes back to the 1940s when the Transu family from Flint began to vacation at Crystal Lake on the East End. We would rent a cottage. But in 1954, Dad found a cottage on the west end of Crystal Lake. And so we were situated near enough for us to become members of the Congregational Summer Assembly.
I come from a family of history buffs, and so all of us are. So it's a family trait.
I was honored to be asked to be the Assembly Archivist. And for over 20 years, I truly enjoyed this wonderful job. I have helped to set up 2 history nights, and I've been in charge of 4 of them. So I know a little bit about what it takes to put a history night together, and I'd like to acquaint you with the immense undertaking that this does require.
It's a challenge. I think that people don't realize until they walk in here and look around how many things Katherine, Devens, Katie Gosnell, and Tammy Royle pulled together and saved and framed and put together in a way that people can appreciate.
Katherine Devens was the assistant to Ruth Nichols, and in 1954, the Assembly Board of Directors appointed her the first archivist of the Assembly. And it was really necessary to do that at this time because quite a wealth of material had been put away in boxes under beds of various folks around the Assembly. And she could see that it was important that they gathered all of this into one space.
Katherine Devens, who was then the archivist, really wanted people to have a better understanding of where the Assembly came from. As generations go by, people begin to build bigger cottages, take up different activities, get involved in different kinds of things. And it's very easy to forget what the Assembly was like and how it started. And History Night brings that back to new generations.
Her first act as archivist was to see that a file cabinet was bought, put into a corner of the office, and given a little bit of space so that the history of the Assembly could be assembled in a logical fashion and stored, locked up, and kept secure. That was her first gift. Her second gift was when she bequeathed to the Assembly her 2 large personal scrapbooks. This long, the old kind with the black photo paper, and she had done this as a child and just kept adding to it year after year after year. And it is a wonderful, complete history of the early days of the Assembly. And now we are beholden to Katherine for giving us this wonderful start of a legacy to build on.
And the first History Night was in 1983. And looking back through the old bulletins, the winter bulletin of that year made no mention of it. Now I made a big splash in this year's bulletin, but there was no mention. It was just on the Sunday bulletin for the service right before the night. It just said there will be a historical night at the community room. And nobody, I think, really knew what that was going to be all about.
That was when Katherine took apart her scrapbooks, some of the pages, and put them out on the tables in the community room.
But as it was organized in the beginning, it was just pictures on tabletops. And people would walk from one tabletop to another. They'd have little captions underneath. But as time went on, this obviously was not a terribly satisfactory way to do it. And so during Tammy's tenure, very long tenure as archivist, they started bringing in pews from the meeting house and standing boards, as in V's like this, in front of them, and then pinning the pages of photographs along the board so people could see them standing up, not bending over.
I just felt that history is to be enjoyed, and so let's make it more user-friendly. This is not a small undertaking, and why we have now changed from every 3 years to every 4 years. And I suppose I might be said to be responsible for that, because for me it was a 14-hour day. And I'm sure I did not tell Jane Cooper that when I was asking her if she would be interested in being the next archivist, because it's probably one of the most difficult responsibilities that the archivist has. So now this schedule starts at 8:30 in the morning, when Ken and the maintenance crew go over to the church and load up between 14, 16 church pews. At the same time, I'm over at Pilgrim Place unloading the file cabinets, and we now have 5 of them. So there is a lot to share. The first 2 things are always the Operetta Scrapbooks, one for the adults and one for the children. And each of these books has a program and pictures of each operetta. And it is the most asked for thing when people come to Pilgrim Place. The historic ledgers of the lodge are brought over, and there are more than 1 or 2. Now, the lodge, of course, was where the Woods Courts are now. Bud Strong meticulously compiled this book that we did for our centennial, Pilgrim Pathways. And it is, of course, the history of every cottage that is on the assembly grounds. And his map work, all of it, beautifully done. But the master albums of this, the paper copy, take 2 albums because they're all in color. We couldn't afford to print this in color pictures, but the master has the colored picture, not only the front of your cottage, but also of the back. The bound books that we have as a set of every assembly news that has ever been printed, along with every church bulletin. And these are in bound copies, and these are all out, and this is really the assembly history in a nutshell. One of the things I'm very proud of is our antique postcard collection. And Bud Strong donated the one that he had made and they kept at their cottage, which are postcard now of places around the assembly, sometimes cottages, M22 way back when, views of the assembly. So adding to that, we have had people who have, gone on eBay and this sort of thing and researched and gotten many postcards that they could from that era and have added to our collection. Another thing is the Centennial Album. And we did so many things for our centennial celebration. There are oral histories to listen to. We've had over 90 people who have given us interviews over the years of how they remember the early days or when they were here at the assembly. And they're so very interesting. And our people in charge have made up so you could put an earphone on and listen to these tape recordings.
There are a lot of tapes that were done just by people who were interested in getting down for the record their memories of growing up at the CSA in the 20s and 30s and 40s. That became formalized into the oral histories.
At one point, we also used to put the lounge into a display of operetta memorabilia. So we had costumes and props and all that sort of thing, and some posters all around to give the feel of maybe an operetta that you were in. And I also have put together an album of assembly letterhead stationery. But as I'm packing up these boxes, then when the fellas are through with setting up the church pews, then they bring the truck over and load up all of the boxes that I've assembled. And I work from then until 1 o'clock, and putting out the displays of things and opening them up to pages that I think people would be interested in, so on. At 1 o'clock, my assistants arrive, who then begin to take apart the scrapbooks, starting with Katherine's first scrapbook, and begin to post the pictures from the album up. And you can't work ahead. It's all sequential. And you just have to keep working along, item by item, board by board, until you get up to the current year. And you see, every year I would take maybe 15 or 20 pictures of that year at the assembly. So you have those to add in every 4 years. And that's why you have to keep track of the number of boards, because that keeps increasing. And I don't even want to go to the part where we run out of room in the assembly. So we'll just let somebody else be concerned about that, Jane. Thank you. It takes about 4 hours to get all of these album pages pinned up to the board. And these things cannot be left unattended because most of them are irreplaceable and they have to be watched. It's a security situation. The bonus is that if you sign up to be a security person, you've got the whole place to yourself for an hour, and you can move along at your own rate and look at everything ahead of time. So I don't have a problem getting people to sign up for that hour. So the archivists come back at 7 o'clock, and I usually greet everyone who comes, and that's helpful for me to get an idea then of the number of people, which usually number over 200 every year, who are interested in seeing these pictures. The archives now provide magnifying glasses, many of them with a little light in them, because so many of these, especially older pictures, they have group shots, and you just can't see the individual faces very well without a magnifying light. We also always have a sale of surplus historic items, like the chair covers from the old dining room, history booklets that we have a surplus of, operetta posters, and that sort of thing. It then goes till 9:30. The first year we did it till 10, and that was a mistake, and this is why. People come at 9:15 or 9:20, which is the hours, 7 to 9:30, but they're not nearly halfway through by 9:30, even though we kind of give them an indication that we'll be closing the doors at 9:30. And of course, we let them, the stragglers, go all the way through. But you see, the real work is about to begin again for us. And that is every single page that we put up at 1 o'clock has to come back down. Now this takes at least an hour, so we're about between 10:30 and 11 o'clock by the time we get them all boxed up, the scrapbooks and all the display items back in the boxes, which I then lock in the archive office. The thing that makes it worthwhile is hearing all of the thank yous and that I'm so glad you do this, and that's why I can answer the question of why don't you do it more often? So now you know why we don't do it. And I think it's more appreciated. If we did it every year, it would become habitual and not nearly as interesting as waiting a few years in between, and you appreciate it more. So what is History Night? Well, it's a walk through time. And as we see family and old friends again, it is a reminder of the heartwarming connection of folks that the assembly brings to your life.
This is home for so many people. Many people have moved a great deal, and this is the only place that has been stable. And to come to History Night and see not only pictures of your own childhood, but possibly of your parents' childhood, and say, yes, it is very much the same place that has always been home for me and for my family. It's something that's very powerful for people, and very important.